And we begin with a CBS 21 News exclusive into the capital city in crisis.
CBS 21 News has learned that the U.S. Justice Department is conducting a wide-ranging criminal investigation into financial transactions during the administration of former Harrisburg Mayor Stephen Reed.
This is big. CBS 21's Chris Papst is live here in the studio with us with the exclusive details on this. Chris?
Well, Rob and Tanya, multiple sources have confirmed that a secret federal grand jury has convened in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, to investigate Harrisburg's financial mess, specifically financial transactions involving current and former officials, including former Mayor Stephen Reed. We have also been told that the Justice Department is ramping up its investigation, bringing more agents into Harrisburg. However, they will not be working in the federal building. They are working off-site so they can continue their work in secret.
3.
Stephen Reed was once one of Pennsylvania's most popular mayors, highly respected and admired. He was credited with saving and revitalizing Harrisburg, but now some of his dealings are under the microscope of federal investigators.
So help me God.
When Reed first took over Harrisburg in 1982, the city was in such bad financial shape it was rumored the previous mayor left bankruptcy papers on his desk. With few resources to start, Mayor Reed seemed to be able to turn the city around. But as soon as he left office 28 years later, the cracks in the city's financial foundation began to show. With a debt 6 times its annual budget, City Council has filed for bankruptcy. The state has taken over, and a receiver has been appointed. Now, sources tell CBS 21 News a grand jury is looking at evidence concerning campaign contributions and if former Harrisburg officials personally profited from city business. One piece of the federal investigation, we're told, includes a bank account from Pottsville that Reed funded with $7 million from the sale of water bonds. Reed opened it without the approval of City Council in the early 90s, and much of the money went to people and businesses in the city. Sources also tell CBS 21 News that the federal probe is looking into Wild West artifacts that Reed bought as mayor to see if anyone personally profited from them. During the past several months, we have tried numerous times to speak to Mayor Reed at his office and his home about this story. And we went back to try to talk to him. But again, he refused to come out and answer our questions. Now, sources also say the federal grand jury is looking at Dauphin County commissioners and other city employees to see if any laws were broken that led to this financial crisis.
Now, have you spoken to the U.S. attorney who's leading this investigation?
Well, I spoke to his office today, and they didn't have a comment. But these grand juries are very secretive. The jury itself is commissioned by the court that they can't talk. Lawyers by law, they can't talk. And the witnesses that come in to testify in front of it, it's strongly suggested that they don't say anything. We uncovered surprising bank accounts involving former Mayor Stephen Reed's financial dealings. Now, Stephen Reed was the mayor of Harrisburg for 28 years. He was called the mayor for life. He won re-election by huge margins and at times ran unopposed. But in the aftermath of his administration, the city has financially collapsed, forcing City Council to file for bankruptcy and the state to take over. And as we look back over his administration, we see that 2 judges and a district attorney agreed that Stephen Reed exceeded the limits of his power as mayor. It was a time that Pennsylvania's capital city would like to forget. It was the early 80s, and the city was in bad shape. The population was fleeing, crime was high, and thousands of buildings were vacant. Its future looked bleak. But a new era was about to begin.
So help me God.
As Stephen Reed was elected. During his 28 years as mayor, the city thrived. Residents moved back, crime fell, and employment increased. Hotels and museums were built, a university was founded, and a baseball team came to town.
There was a certain mythology that grew up around him. He pulled us back from the brink and seemed to move forward and was civic-minded when there was horrible things happening here.
1, 2, 3.
But behind the ribbon cuttings, celebrations, handshakes, and smiles, a much different story was not being told. Dan Miller was on City Council at the time.
Very similar to, I'd say, a dictator. Basically, you had to toe the line or else you were shut out. I wasn't necessarily on the inside, but because of 2 items, I then got completely shut out.
Carl Singleton was on the school board when Reed took it over. He says it was Reed's way or the highway.
So we were trying to put up barriers against the swap and bond transactions. However, we were summarily removed. What we need is a true democracy, not a controlled democracy, which is how Steve Reed operated.
And the way Reed operated was challenged. In 1989, he was taken to court by City Council member Resden Moore. Moore claimed Reed abused his power as mayor by entering into a contract with the Harrisburg Senators without the City Council's approval. Today, the Senators are credited for revitalizing City Island. But did Reed abuse his power in how he brought the team here? The court ruled yes. Quote, the mayor had no authority to negotiate contracts imposing financial burdens and obligations on the city of Harrisburg without the authority or approval of City Council. But the contracts had already been signed, and the team was playing ball here. A few years later, Reed was back in court again, this time for setting up 2 bank accounts without the approval of City Council. This never-before-released document acquired by CBS 21 News and confirmed by the Harrisburg Authority shows one of those accounts. Reed used $7 million from the sale of water bonds to open the account in 1990. As you can see, much of the money was used for big purchases, including bonds and T-notes worth upwards of $3.1 million. But that's not all. The paperwork we obtained shows Reed also sent millions to another bank account in Pottsville. From this account, he doled out huge amounts of money. So much money, Reed was sued and taken to court by 13 Harrisburg residents, claiming the mayor abused his power by not getting City Council's approval. And the residents won. In his decision, the late Judge Joseph Kleinfelter wrote, quote, the mayor unlawfully usurped power vested in City Council. But citing lack of authority, Kleinfelter said he would not, quote, fine the mayor, as requested by the citizens' lawsuit. The Harrisburg 13 remain upset to this day. Pamela Parson is one of those 13.
It was a financial house of cards. I mean, we borrowed money to pay back borrowed money. Basically, it was a slap on the wrist, don't do it again, and he continued to do it in more creative ways.
Reed's fiscal actions also caught the attention of the district attorney at that time. DA Richard Lewis, now a sitting Dauphin County judge, investigated Reed in the 1990s and concluded, quote, the mayor acted beyond the limits of his legal authority. But Lewis went on to say, none of these improprieties appear to rise to the level of criminal conduct. Reed was motivated solely by what he saw to be the best interest of the city. Now, I did get a chance to speak to Stephen Reed in his office where he works about this story, but he chose not to comment.
Now the capital city in crisis. Tomorrow, state lawmakers will hold a hearing on Harrisburg's financial crisis. The Senate Committee on Local Government wants to probe key financial dealings involving the incinerator. It's expected they'll look at a city council vote from 2003, which many consider to be the beginning of the crisis. Now, CBS 21 News has uncovered new information about behind-the-scenes wheeling and dealing that apparently took place in the days before that pivotal vote. CBS 21's Chris Pabst is live with the Dauphin County Mobile Newsroom in Harrisburg with his exclusive story tonight. Chris?
Well, Rob, in part, the Senate wants to know if any public officials in Harrisburg profited personally off of city business, and they will take a look at a city council vote from 2003. You see, back then, the incinerator was shut down, and Mayor Stephen Reed, in a last-ditch effort, wanted to save it. Essentially, he wanted city council to approve a $120 million loan to repair it. But at first, city council said no. But then when the vote happened, it passed 6-1. So what changed council's mind?
I don't know whose votes he secured because he didn't secure my vote. I cannot be bought by no penny or no $1 million. You know, it would be arrogant of me to take a bribe and come back and run for the mayor.
That was Mayor Linda Thompson earlier this year, responding to our questions about this, the forensic audit on the incinerator. This document, backed by 8,000 pages of data, sheds new light on a 2003 vote by City Council to accept a loan to repair it. Within this report, CBS 21 News found a brief email exchange that raises questions about what really happened. The audit says at first, when City Council members stood in the way of the loan being adopted, they were offered $500,000 for a, quote, special projects fund. An advisor to Mayor Stephen Reed wrote this in an email to a colleague, quote, Council President Richard House will hold the vote until he hears from the mayor. I understand Council is getting its money, so the usual crap is flying. With the outcome of the vote still uncertain, Mayor Reed took over. Quote, "If all of you keep this up, you will permanently kill the prospect of the retrofit bonds being adopted by council. With so little time available to this office, I find myself again having to edit and rewrite staff work products." But this line is getting the most attention. It was emailed by Andy Giorgione to a colleague 3 weeks before the vote. It references Harrisburg businessman Fred Clark and Reynolds Construction, which was hired to work on the project. Quote, "Reynolds and Freddie are getting paid $1 million and think they can deliver the votes." So whose votes were delivered? And where did that $1 million go?
And I think it's clear from the documents that we obtained that someone needs to look at this.
Bill Cluck sits on the Harrisburg Authority Board, which released the audit. He says state and federal investigators need to subpoena people to get answers because information is still missing.
It's been our understanding that former Mayor Reed's files disappeared from City Hall during the transition. To me, that is if in fact that is true, that's a violation of state law.
Mayor Thompson was on City Council in 2003 and voted yes on the loan. When we pressed her on the emails in the audit, this is how she reacted.
We got no money in exchange for the vote, which is what you started out saying.
Yes.
Period.
Okay.
And that's the end of my discussion.
That is what the audit says. Okay.
That's the end of my discussion.
Now, when the loan was approved, millions of dollars in fees were paid out. So many people had a huge financial stake in this project happening. Now, we did reach out to former Mayor Stephen Reed, Angie Giorgione, Fred Clark, and Reynolds Construction, but the only person we were able to get an official comment from was former President of City Council, Richard House, and he said, quote, "I honestly feel people did make money off this deal. My gut feeling tells me something occurred that should not have, but I have nothing to hide from. Council did nothing wrong." Now, tomorrow for the hearing, which will take place in the Capitol building, former Mayor Stephen Reed is scheduled to be there to answer questions. Live at the Dauphin County Mobile Newsroom in Harrisburg, Chris Pabst, CBS 21 News. Now, when the loans were approved, millions of dollars were paid out in fees, so plenty of people had a huge financial stake in this project. Now, we did reach out to former Mayor Stephen Reed, Fred Clark, Andy Giorgione, and Reynolds Construction, but the only official comment that we could get came from former Council President Richard House, who said, quote, "I honestly feel people did make money off this deal. My gut feeling tells me something occurred that should not have, but I have nothing to hide from. The council did nothing wrong."